Hey, Christine. Thanks for letting me do this at a later date. Uh, it's been a hard week, but thanks again. So, I had all of these in leaflets, but for the sake of presenting, I took them all out of the binder to show you. So, I'll go through each chapter that I did and kind of how I reflected on it, and then I'll respond to your concluding questions as well. So, the first one I did was a assessments and introduction. What I did in this was I wrote a letter to my future self as a teacher, and it related to the whole idea when we were talking about authenticity and how authentic teachers make the biggest impact on people. And so essentially it's just a letter that I'm going to read the first day of class that I start teaching. And it relates to the whole idea that good teachers put their students first. So that's my goal. It's going to be a reminder. It's not all about me. It's about the students. So for the self, social, and moral development, I went over Bronfenbrenner's biological model for development. And I thought all the different levels was really interesting to evaluate. I liked the idea that being a teacher isn't just about your relationship between you and the students. It's about the parents in the background. It's about the administration, other classrooms, other teachers, like the social, political environment that we're experiencing. I never really thought about it that way, and I think this model kind of tied all of that together. It made me actually contemplate or ask the question, how will I be able to get parents involved and see everything that's happening? And so I did a little bit of research on the side. I actually found this website called Seesaw, which helps students and parents and teachers all collaborate together. It's actually kind of like Blackboard, but I think it works better. But it's really cool because the teacher can post things that they're learning, can post like take-home things, or if the parents wanted to do extra involvement with their kids, there could be instructions or informative videos. I thought that was really cool. So, in behavioral views of learning, I was trying to figure out what would be the best way to motivate students. So I did a pros and cons list for operant and classical conditioning. So that's what that is. It's just evaluating what I perceived as the pros and cons of both, and just trying to think of how I would actually use both of them in the classroom, right? I think operant conditioning is used so commonly, but at the same time, classical conditioning is difficult because it's like, well, I don't know. I feel like it almost takes a choice element away from the students. For cognitive development, I went home and found a book that I wrote in grade 3. It was a picture book about my life. That's me hanging off the boat. And funny enough, I had a grade 1 writing level at grade 3. I couldn't really write at all. Really bad. So I actually used this kind of like a case study. And so what I did was I wrote a little plan on how would I teach myself? How would I approach the situation of a student, being myself younger? And actually kind of, the whole idea of cognitive development, I'll just look at this a little bit, but it was the whole idea of how do you get a student to reach the zone of proximal development? So I kept thinking to myself, how would I help the student achieve more? So it was just interesting because I thought about like, how would I, collaborate with past teachers, understanding the background of the student? How would I collaborate with the parents? Really goes all the way back to Bonhoeffer's model. Sorry. Yeah, it was interesting. All right. Next one I did was the social cognitive views of learning and motivation. And so this basically just went to including self-efficacy and self-regulation in the classroom. And so the big goal here was, how am I going to intrinsically motivate my students? And so I basically just went over a couple things that I could do to motivate students, just kind of brainstorming. So I talked about like the power of self-talk. For me, I need to understand the current state of emotions of a student. Is it emotionally ready to learn something or isn't engaged? How am I going to get them emotionally engaged, right? If you don't have that emotional engagement, no one really learns anything. So, motivation in learning and teaching. This one was a shorter one that I did, but it's actually interesting because I tried to apply this to myself, which is why the text is a little shorter. Basically just thought about, like, how do I stay motivated as a teacher? And so one thing I was thinking about was self-care. So what that article actually talks about is how I made a bullet journal. Just as a way of self-care and thinking to myself. So I have like a mood tracker, and I started this a while ago too. Not long ago, like when this course was done. But it has like a fitness tracker and like a sleep log. Even after the course is done, I'm still doing it. Doing like a little one sentence thing, and it's working really well. But that's the whole idea of self-care. How am I going to apply all this further down the road? Chapter 8, Cognitive Views of Learning. I kind of asked myself a couple questions for this one. More so like, how do I view specific knowledge and general knowledge? How do I make sure the students are actually understanding, but not just understanding, but making concrete examples of, and able to, I'm just going to try adjusting this a little bit. It looks like it's falling back. Ooh. Difficulties of video. So I was just thinking about how will I differentiate my teaching methods and like hands-on, visual, auditory. How am I going to play with all these different things to make sure a student, it actually sticks, right? So that's what this chapter was. I just asked myself a couple questions. And then the last one was learner differences and learner needs. So I actually, I took this one a bit more personally, but I thought about myself as a student. I was kind of using myself as a case study for a lot of these, just to have a little bit of personal reflection. But for that one, I thought about how, for me, I was diagnosed as having like a memory cognitive problem, just because I had a lot of brain injuries at a young age. I had a lot of concussions. So even today, it still affects me. But how would I, as a student, be affected? And then as a teacher, it was basically just a call for me to understand outside the classroom. If a student's having a really hard time understanding something, I mean, for myself, I mean, I couldn't memorize anything. I remember I barely knew the alphabet in like grade 1 or 2, but it was all due to memory, like an inability to actually memorize. So, I mean, my teachers could have just written me off as stupid. They could have ignored my learner needs. But it took it took a good teacher to understand the background. So they actually went to my parents, they understood that I had concussions, and then we tried to work around that. And so those were my, I think, eight chapters that I did. And then in conclusion, we'll quickly go over these questions. So how are you making meaning from what you are learning? Well, like I said, I made the bullet journal. I've been trying to apply a lot of it to myself to understand that it's real and it's not something abstract, right? Like the reality is everyone has different needs. Everyone, for the most part, is pretty unique. At least I believe everyone's pretty unique. And that there's a lot of different complex approaches. Teaching is not an easy job. This class made that even more evident. And it's just all on paper for the most part. We haven't even, I mean, aside from the volunteering I do, it's nothing practical too much. Not too much practical engagement. Like, it's not like we're actually with students. So I really learned a lot. What have been the major learning outcomes from the course? I learned a lot about myself. I remember, it's actually funny because this course was my first teaching specific course, and I was so scared going into it. I was really worried that I'd get into it and I'd just be like, oh shoot, like this isn't for me. But I actually came to the realization that I'm so passionate about kids and I'm passionate about teaching. I'm just so excited to get out there and start learning. What wonders / further topics are you interested in learning about? I mean, I did my paper on it, but I'm still super fascinated about how mental disorders affect a student's learning. I was actually trying to make a comparison about how today in our society, we are commonly understanding that mental health disorders have a serious effect on a student's ability to perform, yet we still treat it as something abstract, and there isn't much funding put towards actually helping these students, right? But I don't know. I just thought about that and how there needs to be better funding for the mental health in schools, because I don't know, it still seems like it's ignored. Where are you hoping to go with your studies and career? Well, I don't know if I ever said. My goal is actually to one day work on the school board. It's a big goal. That's my dream, actually. But my goal eventually is to get a master's of education after a couple of years of teaching. Wouldn't mind being a principal at some point because I love collaboration and managerial duties. I already did that as a career before coming back to school. And no, my goal is actually to work in the school board one day and actually advocate for funding for mental health. That's my goal. Big goal, but I know I can do it. This takes a little bit of effort. And then how might you be able to apply this learning going forward? I think I already mentioned a lot of that already here. I tried to really embrace the material for what it was, but also how it will help me moving forward. Like for an example, I'm not going to sell the textbook. I'm going to keep it just so I can reference back to it when I are having difficulties when teaching, right? More so a lot of my articles, I mean, think about the bullet journal and how I'm going to hopefully keep doing that. I mean, I really enjoy it. I wrote a letter to myself when I'm going to be a teacher one day. Reflected on a lot of the questions in a way that, how will I be a teacher? Like, what kind of teacher do I want to be, right? It's theoretical, but it's still working towards a future aspect or approach. So I think that's all the questions. I'm going to try posting this to YouTube because I think that'll be the easiest way for you to see it. And yeah, thank you. And thank you again for the extension. Appreciate it.